Just a quick reminder to silence phones if you haven't already done so, and want to really encourage everyone to leave your cameras on today because, like I said earlier, we'll be live streaming, and so we want to encourage you to do that, but please take breaks as needed.
Well, I think what we will do is go on and get started. And I know you guys are incredibly busy. December is a challenging month of closing things out and preparing for a new year, which is really, really hard to believe. And so we're going to kick this off today with Commissioner Glass, and we'll just go right through our co-leads. And if the Lieutenant Governor is able to join us, I know she's planning to, but things happen. So if she's not here, Dr. Thompson, you'll just hop right in and take over after the commissioner. So Commissioner Glass, I'll let you get us started.
Thanks, Amanda. Should I cover the overall norms that the Lieutenant Governor was going to discuss, or just hand things off to President?
Let's go on and plan to hand it off, and then we'll improvise and we'll see how it goes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hope that all of you have sufficiently recovered from the Thanksgiving holiday and been on the treadmill and the Peloton or out walking the neighborhood and are ready for the next round of this. Because this is a difficult weight management month for me, and I think it is for the entire world. So we've got just bins of holiday candies and chocolates and stuff, and I'm weak around that. So hopefully all of you are persevering through that. Thanks for being with us and helping us continue this important initiative. It's hard to believe that we've been working together for nearly 2 years. And during that time, and with our collaboration, we've been able to take some amazing actionable steps in strengthening that transition from secondary to post-secondary education. So very tangible connections, some of which we have funded with some of our COVID relief funds. So we're going to start, that's going to start running out here in the next couple of years. So we got to start thinking about how we sustain that going forward. We've seen folks representing so many roles that make up our Kentucky pipeline and workforce come together and think about how we can improve our policies, our resources, our practices, the things that we can do to help our students go from high school into higher education and then into the workforce. The commitment to this work and that continued synergy is both exciting and inspiring. And on behalf of the co-chairs of the CEC, Lieutenant Governor Coleman, Dr. Thompson, and myself, we truly thank you for your time and dedication to this effort. I'm going to hand things over to my friend and colleague, Dr. Aaron Thompson now, who has got some sage words of wisdom. So Dr. Thompson.
Well, Commissioner, I appreciate you think I've got sage words. I do have words, without a doubt. It's what a year, folks. That's what I'll start off with by saying, what a year. You know, a lot of good ups, a few downs, but overall good year. The item that I'm most thankful for is to have colleagues like you to work with and to really focus on what's good for the state of Kentucky. I'm also blessed, obviously, I see my board chair on here. I want to call him out, especially Luke Benser, to have someone like him to work with at CPE and higher ed to do the things that we need to do. One of the items we've been recognized for around the nation, as you probably have heard, and I get the blessing of being one of the people to talk about it, is the synergy that we have with this effort here. The synergy that we have with colleagues that I view as close and as friends, like Dr. Glass, to really put aside our silos and think about what's truly good for the population that we serve. And we serve the same population. You know, it may be at different stages, but the same population. So I want to thank you all for the year that you've given us. You know, I also want to, Lieutenant Governor's not on here yet. I'll give her a shout out. It's really good to, oh, there she is. I see Susan now.
I'm here.
You know, in that regard. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just be quiet and let you, Lieutenant Governor, jump in. I'll come back and say what I need to say here in a second. But I was just getting ready to say what great, you know, sort of year we had by working with you also. So anyway, I'll let you speak and then I'll just come back and finish mine up.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off while you're getting ready to say nice things about me.
I'll delay it and say it again.
There you go. So I got Sandra Day O'Connor Coleman O'Brien with me today. Yesterday I brought Sonia, and she's a spaz. And this one would just lay down in anybody's lap and doesn't care. So I got a lot of toddlers in my house right now, you guys. I'm trying to like get them all, squared away with humans, other humans. So, but thank you guys so much. I'm so excited. I think this is a time for reflection, of course, at this point in the year. And I think about where we've started and all of the progress that has been made. And I think about where we get to go next. And I know Dr. Thompson was just talking about, the attention and I think the appreciation that other states have for this work shows how critically important it is. And it really was, as the resident basketball coach, it really was the right time and situation for us to be able to pull something like this off. And it's something that was so needed. And I think about the purpose that we started with and that has guided us every step of the way. And we've done, there are folks on here who have helped us to do data collection, analysis, and we found that the voices from folks across the Commonwealth shared their lived experience with us. I think back to, I think Dr. Thompson and Dr. Glass are always laugh at me about this, but when they said we were going to do a press conference to announce this, I was like, okay, but I don't really think anybody's going to care. And I could not have been more wrong. And that's a good thing. Because the reaction that we got, the people who reached out and asked to be a part of this process was more than I had ever thought we would get. And so I'm so proud that we were able to do this together. And I'm proud of our progress, but we still have so much work to do. And I think that's why we're all here and why we're all committed to continuing this work on the continuum. But, to have both Jason and Aaron co-lead this process, to have the amazing supporters that we have on this call and on all of our calls. I'm so grateful for, because I know you all, even where we may differ, we all have public education and the kids in our schools at top of mind. And that at the end of the day, that's all you can ask, certainly. And while we're sitting here, I just want to say, Representative Tipton, congratulations to you. I think.
That's yet to be determined.
Yes, you can get back to me on that one, but congratulations to you. And I'm happy that somebody from my neighboring hometown is and somebody from rural Kentucky is going to head up the committee. So congratulations to you and best of luck. And I'm going to turn it right back over to Aaron Thompson so he can pick up where he left off, getting ready to give me a compliment. Go ahead.
Well, I'll pick up where I left off to give you a compliment. It's been great, obviously, Lieutenant Governor, to work with you and Dr. Glass in this effort, and could not have expected better collegiality. Jason with you and your team, Lieutenant Governor with you and your team. I mean, it has been a few growing pains, true enough, but truly focusing on what we need to focus on, we were always there. Also, I'll do a shout out to Representative Tipton too. We are happy that you were elected as chair of the House Ed Committee, and that's important just simply because we know you know education, and what you don't know, you're willing to talk to us about and look at how we can make it better. So I'll throw out an extra congratulations. I'm more congratulating you on your daughter graduating, but that's once again in my silo here, so I won't get there. I also want to echo my gratitude to the Continuum, all you folks are on here. Over the past 2 years, we have engaged more than 300 people in focus group interviews. You know, we heard from you. We heard from the work group participation members here and other members that's out in the community. And that's all across from K-12 students, family, higher ed, citizens, legislators, you know, everybody who would talk with us. We talked about where the potholes lied in this transition area. We talked about what it means to have lifelong learning. We talked about what it means to have a strong education system from early childhood through post-secondary. We talked about the idea of not just looking at, you know, how we prepare for college, but how we prepare for career, and college being a pipeline to that. And so all of those conversations have changed some nomenclature, not just here in the state of Kentucky, but in other places. And as I started the conversation off with earlier, we had a chance to talk about that. I want to give my gratitude, and then we'll put up slide number 3, to Amanda and the entire team. I mean, there's just so many to talk about, and I'll let Amanda call those names out. I personally want to thank you because I know how hard these folks work. And as we cross our staff with each of us who are co-leads, you know, sometimes that could get tough, and it hasn't. So I want to thank Amanda and her team for not only not making it tough, but to make it synergistic. And so thank you, Amanda, Jennifer, Robin, you know, Joette, everybody that I know I won't be able to mention. So let's put up slide 3, if you will. And this is what we're going to be covering here in this last meeting of the season. And we're going to be talking about the 2021 recommendation actions, what has happened with those, and we're going to prioritize 2022. So we got a lot to do here in a short amount of time. And there's a lot more I want to say, but Amanda has told me that I can't say everything I want to say. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Amanda.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson and co-leads. It sounds like I'm awful to him, but we got to stay on task. And so he is not wrong. I'm super excited to share with you really where we've been, and we've kind of done that with you throughout the year as we've met. We've tried to share and highlight and elevate work that has aligned to the recommendations of the continuum. You know, there is a lot of people who say, why do you guys even meet? And it's because of this. Every one of you brings something different to the table and really pushes on each other's thinking of how we can do this well together. And so what we're going to do is briefly go through the 2021 recommendations, because those didn't go away. They are still very live. And our 2022 recommendations coming to you today. When we get back together at the beginning of 2023, we really need to think through how we evolve this group and how we move forward into action. And so we can't go without starting where we had our first list of recommendations. So Robin, if you don't mind to share, I'm just going to share the recommendation piece, not the suggested action. So last year, you all got to see the suggested actions and then what the recommendations were. And so I'm just going to briefly go through this. So this was successful transition to post-secondary last year. We started very broad and realized, oh my word, this thing is a monster. But we kind of narrowed into advising and affordability is where it kind of narrowed into based on the feedback from the field, from multiple Kentuckians really sharing their lived experiences from across the Commonwealth. And so you all last year had identified employ more post-secondary transition advisors to help students plan for and transition to post-secondary education. And then you had create a comprehensive communications campaign to better equip high school students with necessary knowledge for that successful transition. You really wanted to catalyze a statewide cross-agency campaign to improve FAFSA completion rates and expand institutional capacity to support students as they transition to post-secondary. And so what happened out of this, and we've kind of informed you, so I won't go into this very, very much, but the actions that have taken place are quite impressive. And so as Commissioner Glass had already mentioned, we were able to use ARPA dollars to create the Kentucky Advising Academy. So where we knew we weren't going to have more staff, it was not the time to really appropriate more staff, but what could we do with what we had? And so we were able to create a design team. The design team was made up of KIA, advisors, college advisors, counselors, the Counselors Association, KDE. We had a couple of principals on. We have a whole group of folks who designed and recommended things that just needed to be shared at KAA. And it wasn't that the Kentucky Advising Academy would duplicate the work, rather elevate the work. And so when we were talking about, excuse me, affordability measures, we invited the KIA coaches to join us. So Kim Dolan had her folks go to the regional appropriate places and share what they offer, the support that they offer. That's just one example. We've had career and technical education share. We've had advisors from the different campuses, 4-year and 2-year, join in with these counselors and family resource center folks just to learn about what's important about advising and how to help with that transition. It is fresh in its work. We are monitoring the analytics like crazy. We have over 400 people signed on to the notifications of just-in-time information. We've hosted multiple webinars, one face-to-face, and we're going to do another in the spring. And we'll have a better idea of impact, but the qualitative feedback that we're receiving is we really need this because we get a little overwhelmed and there's a lot for the counselors to do. So how can we help build a team? So that's moving in the right direction and we'll keep you posted on that. But that was because of your voice to say, look, people are not getting what they need and we've got to address this. And this has really been quite the same song we hear from the districts of just, we want to do it. It's just a lot going on. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so that's on a good start. The comprehensive communications campaign to better equip high school students. This is something we feel like has happened in the different agencies, but we really like to talk in February more about bringing these recommendations around communications into more like a task force or something that would really help us have some common messaging from the source that is the deliverer. So whatever that message may be, that we have a common message that is clear. We have had great conversations with lots of the K groups, as we call them, the co-ops, obviously the groups who are on this call saying, what else can we do? And one of the things is we just need to tell more people. And there's a lot of people and a lot of message to get out there and we have information overload. So how to do that strategically is something we need to continue to work on. But it's in the process. KIA took out the Catalyze a Statewide Cross-Agency campaign. They did create a cross-agency team to really just share their efforts to, so we could all help get the message out and really work towards FAFSA. I know Kim had shared a meeting or two ago, and Diana had shared about that there was an increase in FAFSA completion in high school students, which is great. That's what we want to see. But where they saw their lower numbers was students who are currently college students and not reapplying. So that's something that actually you'll see in the recommendations coming up today from the work group on first year success. So you'll hear about that soon. And then expand institutional capacity to support students as they transition to secondary, post-secondary. This really lies in the hands, honestly, with where we went with KAA. The other piece that we did was teamed up with Garrett, Kentucky, and they hooked up with KIA and I believe KDE and Pritchard to even offer Facebook Live events for families to really start to inform people and make it really friendly so they didn't have to sit in a room and do this. Also, Parent Camp that is established out of Northern Kentucky, Julie Kyle, is really doing some incredible work. It is accessible to the whole state. It's an online, excuse me, parent convening. They do, they have one tonight about ESL students, but they also have Career Camp, which really talks about career pathways and ways to make those transitions. And so we are actually going to be talking to them come January to really being more aware of what we're trying to promote so they can be a big part of that. And that's a huge, huge family network. And so I think there's some potential there. So we're in the process of this, but realizing we really need to be probably even more intentional and strategic about how we bring folks together. Now, that is just a snippet of what we know about. So in the chat or unmute, the first question we want just to ask you, and then we won't spend a long time on this, is where are other bright spots where this is taking place that we don't know about, that we need to elevate or be in touch with folks or reach out? So again, Robin, if you'll show that slide again, we're just going to look at the post or successful post-secondary transition and see if there's any additional things that you would recommend to that we are not aware of? That are there things going on in different parts of the state or different constituency groups or different regions that you know of that are really doing some incredible work around any of these recommendations that we would need to expand our network and be intentional on including that as a consideration as we move forward to roll more of our actions out. I'll pause.
Yeah, Amanda, I just want to though clarify one thing. Even though we've done a little better on FAFSA this year than we did last year, that doesn't mean we're doing great on FAFSA by comparison to the amount of students that are filling it out. As you well know, we're not. There's too much money left on the table. Not that I don't think that we're doing what we can in that area of promoting FAFSA. I just want to make sure that we don't leave people with the idea that we are, in fact, not leaving a lot of federal money on the table, and it really affects our low-income students more. And that is a transition issue still heavily.
Absolutely.
Amanda,
Yes,
if I could,
yes, please.
I want to link two things, and Dr. Glass is on here, and Lou Young is as well. When we talk about comprehensive communication campaign and employ more post-secondary transition advisors to help students, this links totally with this whole portrait of a graduate or portrait of a learner,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
So when we talk about what's been approved by the State Board of Education and Dr. Glass's initiative and the Cool Council, all of this comes in to let's not forget and maybe figure out how to put that verbiage in and make that connection more clear as far as what that portrait of a learner or a graduate looks like across the state.
Yes. I'm just making note of that, Penny. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that's something else we're even bringing up a little bit later too in the ninth grade on track work. And Amy had placed in the chat, definitely elevating early childhood profession through early childhood apprenticeships, youth and adult, 110%. Intentional connection further down the pipeline. Amy, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a great connection. Anything else on this specific set of recommendations from last year that you really want to bring up or something we need to consider? Great. I'm made note of this. This is super helpful. Okay, Robin, if you'll go to the next set of. Okay, great. So early post-secondary opportunity recommendations from last year was just digging into how students can earn college credit, whether that be AP, IB, Cambridge, dual credit, even articulated credit is where this started last year, and what's available and how much our state supports. We felt like that was an important piece. And so you can see actually the first recommendation listed last year was the recommendation that was prioritized as number one, is ensure every high school student has access to at least one early post-secondary opportunity and the support to successfully complete the course, particularly those students and families who have been traditionally underrepresented in early post-secondary opportunities. Increase state funding to cover the cost of early post-secondary opportunities for all students, including equity grants for low and middle income students and families. And then strengthen local and regional partnership among high schools, institutions, and the workforce to expand access, advising, and support to early post-secondary opportunities. So part of this, there's been a ton of work around this, and I think you're going to see even more. Number one, we are ecstatic that in the budget language, dual credit scholarship opportunities were expanded to include more courses in general education and career and technical education. And we are incredibly grateful for that opportunity and that financial support. That's huge. And we hope that it continues. What it also did was really push on us to go back and look at the policy, look at our practices, and really look at what's going on currently, who's taking it. And so we were able to pull data and then really talk to students about what's going on. And I think you'll see that into the next set of recommendations. And so we have been in the process of revising the policy. It has not gone before the CPE yet. It is almost in draft form, but really digging into, and you'll hear this again, this is a little repetitive, but really looking into that second part of the support and to successfully complete the course, particularly students and families who've been traditionally underrepresented. So really looking at setting some goals around increasing student participation. I will tell you on a positive note, when we were digging in, year to year, it's about 17 or 18% participation. But if you look over a student's lifeline in high school from freshman through senior year, about 40% of our high school graduates are graduating with dual credit that they've earned. That does not count AP or IB credit earned. And so that's really encouraging, but we really need to expand that further. And so we're in the process of not only doing that, but working on a toolkit. That was one of the suggested actions last year, as well as some professional learning about advising around how to advise students into dual credit. It's not how many credits you can get to the finish line, but meaningful, highly transferable courses that are aligned to programs and pathways. And so that has been a real focus area for us to see how we can strengthen that. And we are grateful for the opportunity. There is funding, obviously, for AP and IB tests and Cambridge exams to help with assist with that financial burden. And then SB 101 help to update and streamline the articulated credit, especially for so far KCTCS and the next steps with the 4 years. And so we're in the process of this, but I think what we got from you guys this time last year is, okay, so we need to know more about dual credit. We need to know more about who is taking it, who does have it, what are the offerings. And we have some schools that go from offering 1 to 3 dual credit classes to we have some high schools offering 37 different courses. And so it's quite different. And so this is still in progress, but if there is something that you know that you would like to share, I will tell you the other thing that has taken place is that during our KAA visits, actually Robin and one of our KAA coordinators have really led some K-12 folks and really higher ed in there as well into looking at the local high school data or the district data and seeing what opportunities are offered and who is taking those classes, really looking at the student demographics and different populations and digging into access and opportunities, advising, and what really is available. And I know you won't be shocked to hear that there's some limitations in teachers who are credentialed to teach dual credit, and some of the offerings and others have gotten incredibly innovative with really sharing resources through online and partnering. And we have lots of great examples of that. But I'm going to pause there. And Robin, if you'll leave this on the screen, is there anything that we're missing on this that you feel like someone has just done an incredible job? And something you would like to elevate or making connections for future work?
Man, the Representative Tipton here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what, of course, we met yesterday and we had this discussion again this morning about we want to make sure these dual credit classes, as we try to get more and more students taking dual credit, are actually transferring and applicable to their college degree.
Yes.
And could you expand a little bit on some of the conversation we've had on that and what we might need to look at?
Yes, sir. So what we've talked about is it's all very much transferable. Those courses do transfer. That's in our law. What's happening, though, is some of the courses that the students are taking will transfer into an elective. And it's not exactly aligned to their program of study or their pathway in which they're pursuing their credential or their degree. And so what we have talked about, and I'd love conversation around this, of how we really maybe narrow in more on the general education courses. The career and technical education dual credit pathways are aligned to the pathways to earn a credential. The general education courses sometimes are used as electives and are not highly transferable as far as transferable as counting towards their degree program. And so that is something we've been talking about. And so would love your input on your view on that and narrowing that scope a little more to be highly transferable into their program. So they transfer and it goes into elective many times, but to really transfer towards their degree. I'll stop there.
Amanda, a couple
Yes,
of things just to catch you all up with conversations I'm having. I'm having conversation with private institutions and public institutions because some of those have, Mason, you're on here. I got a chance to talk with the Asbury president yesterday on this, that we haven't been probably as connective, if you will, in this area with our campuses that are offering dual credit, and those that are really within what I call a curricular pathway that makes sense. Most of those gen ed courses will be if those advising pieces that we put in place for K-12 and higher ed are solidly in place. And also in higher ed, we're creating this graduate profile where we're going to start building in competencies, if you will, around those employability competencies that hopefully many can get while they're still in high school and transfer them into higher ed. It will be a pathway in itself. So that should help some. But bottom line, I think we're going to have to build out these pathways in those transfer courses, just like we've done in those technical courses. If not, we will still have this take place. So I'm calling on our higher ed and our K-12 folks to really work together to consider that and not just try to collect hours as a way of saying that we've collected hours around affordability and that where people are graduating high school with X amount of hours. Let's just make sure they're graduated in high school with X amount of hours. We want them to be as many as possible, but they really truly will save them time when they get to any of our colleges, whether private or public.
And I agree with all that. And I understand Representative Tipton's concern, and I'm glad that he asked that. I think you had framed it up too, Amanda. One comment, being deeply involved in dual credit at the University of Kentucky, we only offer courses that align with the UK core. So that takes care of the issue of transferability. But of course, we transfer in dual credit courses taken from other institutions for high schoolers who matriculate to UK. My one thought, though, in terms of the nuance of it that I know Representative Tipton will appreciate is this is a good opportunity for kids to do some exploration. So if they're thinking about forestry, or if they're thinking about something, and to pick up a couple of courses that eventually may not translate into a college curriculum contract, it's still a good chance for them to have an opportunity. It's just striking the balance between exploration and waste, I think, when it comes to accumulating those credits over time.
Well, that's true, Lou, and I don't disagree with that. But when we talk to these kids, when we talk to these kids and verifying your point a little more, they don't know the difference, though.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just courses offered, and it's a dual credit course. So then it gets down heavily to advising, right?
Yeah.
And it gets down heavily to the conversation about how do we align that. We don't want to stop exploration either. But bottom line, we also find out that good exploration happens once they get to a college campus, a little more than just taking a course when they're in high school, even though it's a college course. I would hope that we're able to work in an advising system that would allow all that information to be gathered and to be given in a way that students truly understand what they are taking and how it works into their future.
Agreed.
Great feedback. Anything else? You'll see this come back up in the 2022 piece because go ahead, Amy. I'm sorry.
No, excuse me, that's okay. Sorry, I've been sick. I'm fine. I'm not contagious, but my voice, I'm just still sporting this new thing here, but I'm just going to flag again. And I think I can't see Dr. Glass, but I think this may get his attention. I think there's a real opportunity for us to have a offline conversation about a pipeline for educators. We've got a youth apprenticeship in place in Kentucky. That's what we're doing to grow the early childhood workforce right now. And I think it's really under the radar. And, we place early childhood educators in childcare settings, in public pre-K, and in Head Start. And we partner with Family and Consumer Sciences and the Kentucky Department of Education to make this happen. It's 4,000 hours. And, the content expert folks on my team could talk about this for days. But I think it's a real opportunity to grow the workforce when we're talking about educators that we all need. And this first bullet and the third bullet. So I hope that resonates. I hope that that made sense. But it is, you know, it's a work-based, earn as you learn. And we're doing some great work in this space with apprenticeships.
Amy, is that a youth apprenticeship or an adult apprenticeship?
We have both.
And I'm not sure this is exactly what you meant, Amy, but it really struck a chord with me in that maybe in some of these recommendations, Amanda, we would actually include the teacher grow your own pipeline efforts that EPSB and the department are working on as well. So, you know, even just adding it in a conversation in the first or third bullet there too, I think might put an exclamation point on it.
Yeah. So we've got a whole portfolio, and we partnered with the Division of Childcare. We've got $2 million over the next couple of years through American Recovery Funds. You know, we've expanded our portfolio. We've got our fingers crossed for our federal preschool development grant, where we've written that in. Amanda was a great partner with us on that. So was the Kentucky Department of Education. So I know we don't want to take up time with this, but you know, this is a great opportunity here. And I know that that's one of the reasons why you wanted early childhood at the table. I can't figure all this stuff out, but that's, you know, exactly why we all do this work together.
Right. That's right. No, I appreciate that, Amy. And there's a couple comments in the chat too, from Dr. Flynn and Leslie Slaughter as well, just about that. And actually it takes us into the next work group from last year that really is a beautiful overlap, which is why these really are not separated. They're all stacked. Is there anything else specifically on EPOs or episodes yet, or for us to actually move on into the same vein of conversation? Okay, Robin, if you don't mind to go to that next one. Thank you. So, I mean, I think this kind of like accentuates what you're saying a little bit, and Lou, in this piece is when the educator workforce and diversity last year, when we were looking at the data, we know that we can't get our students where they need to be if we don't have a strong, diverse teacher workforce. And so this was focused last year on just about, here's again, communication campaign on just that compelling campaign that highlights the importance and benefits of entering the teaching profession. I would even say the education profession. Many of us are in all different roles, but we never left the field. And then there, of course, there's one on enhancement, the recruitment, and then on retention. And if you remember last year, we were balancing, we were like, well, which comes first, the chicken or the egg on how do we prioritize? And they really were pretty much hand in hand, with a little bit of extra emphasis on recruitment of future teachers to increase the number of teachers with an emphasis on underrepresented groups. And then right there with retention, increased teacher and administrator retention and advancement opportunities with attention to underrepresented groups. And there's been a lot of work and conversation this year. Katie has a huge thing on Go Teach Kentucky. And they've really put a lot of efforts into their outreach. I know, Amy, you have your work for the ECE apprenticeships. And then as Leslie was saying, we compile people. So based on this feedback last year, we followed up with convening our CPE leadership, KDE leadership, legislators to really talk about, and EPSB as well, to talk about the teacher pipeline. What can we do collectively together? What is the message, and really where can we go? And we had, and Jim Flynn too, KASS, I forgot, was at the table. And we had a great conversation with Tennessee. We know Tennessee had their registered apprenticeship with a teacher registered apprenticeship. And so heard their story and really have been working together to think through some viable options and really think through how to elevate this profession. So I'm going to stop talking. This kind of rolls into what we were just talking about, but if there's anything further you would like to share or make note of or really elevate for us to highlight. If you remember, we did highlight some programs, but would love to hear more connections that you would have, or to really challenge us to go further.
And the most people are probably aware that CASA has a task force that's been working on retention recruitment. They're actually meeting tomorrow. I got a draft copy of their recommendations over the weekend. They're pretty extensive, but they're going to be meeting tomorrow, and I think it's important to collaborate with all these groups and share information. So just wanted to mention that. And on the Tennessee Apprenticeship, we actually had them at a joint interim education committee earlier this year, and they presented to the Senate and House Education Committee on that. So that is something that we're having active discussions on to see if that's something that might be viable for Kentucky. I think one of the key components of that is these individuals are actually working in the school, they're employed, they're in the school, they're getting clinical experience, and they're also graduating certified within 3 years, which is shortening the time to get them in the classroom. Just a couple of points on that. But there's a lot of conversation going on about a lot of different ideas. And as we look at the legislature session, I think it's important to prioritize those points, because if you throw everything on the table, none of them might get picked up. So I think it's important to work together, prioritize what's attainable and what's going to be most beneficial.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thoughts, feedback?
Hey, Amanda, me again.
Yes, ma'am.
2 things, well, maybe 3. I am a board member on the Fayette Education Foundation, which is, Fayette County, right?
Sure. Yes.
And we are partnering with Fayette County Public Schools and some of the colleges. Recently, what we did, we funded dues for Educators Rising for the high schools, some of the high schools in Fayette County. In the spring, we're looking at having some mock interviews, some practice sessions and that sort of thing to get these kids ready. We are FCPS. I don't know how many people on here from FCPS know that the Grow Your Own program is up and running in Fayette County, and they're looking at how to address the diversity issue. From a personal standpoint, I will always say that a big barrier is who gets vetted and whether or not those get sent on to SBDM, and if SBDM chooses to grant that interview. So we can talk about retention and we can talk about them being prepared, but if they don't get a foot in the door to get that interview, it's not going to change anything.
Thank you, Penny, for sharing that. I did not know that work had advanced as far as it did. So that's super exciting. And I hear you completely. So keep us updated on that, or send me the point of contact. I'd love to hear and know what they're doing so we can elevate that work. That's super important.
I certainly will.
Thank you.
I'll just quickly pipe in. I dropped something in the chat if those are interested in reading. I'm not sure if you need a subscription or not, but there was a nice piece in the New York Times today on this issue of educator shortages, and they make a lot of the usual suspects and the reasons, the complex convergence of reasons that have led to this. But one of the points that they make is it's not just a shortage problem, it's an underqualification problem. And we see that here in Kentucky with the number of teachers that are being employed on emergency certifications has just really dramatically grown over the past few years. So what that means is that in addition to having more vacancies and not having enough applicants, we see superintendents turning to emergency certifications to just put somebody in the role. A superintendent was sitting beside me at the KASS meeting a couple of weeks ago, and he said something that was really resonating to me that I think is true. He said, it's worse than people know. And what he meant by that is that he and other superintendents and principals and teachers in the state are doing all they can to keep it going, so that when you drive by a school, it doesn't seem like there's a problem. Or maybe your kid's going to school and coming home and they're not telling you that there's a problem, but there's a problem. They are barely getting by. It's worse than people know. And I think, I'm just very concerned, I know everyone here is, that at what point does it finally come undone?
Thank you, Commissioner. What else do you guys have to add to this?
Amanda,
Yes, sir.
I want to jump in a little bit. I appreciate this conversation. Appreciate Chair Tipton's remarks. That there's a lot to be done, and we've got to be very strategic. And it's not going to be just kind of a one and done approach. I think it's going to take multi-year comprehensive approach. But I also think there's things we can do in the near term, just things that would elevate the career pathway. I put this in the chat. A few years ago, we identified 5 high demand work sectors in Kentucky, and it appears to us, as if you look at that data, that it's worked. It's shown a light on the importance of those careers. And it puts in place to invite people to consider those careers, and that's worked. And we can do the same thing for education. We can make it a high demand sector. I know Chair Tipton has been talking with Kia and some folks, about the teacher scholarship program. I know in House Bill 277 that passed last session that created option 9. For example, there was a loan forgiveness program in that got stripped out at the end. I've kind of heard from different legislators, it wasn't necessarily conceptual opposition. It was more structural process concerns about that. And so, but we got to think of ways, not necessarily create new pathways, but how do we incentivize people into those pathways? And then one of the things, and Dean Murphy and I were talking about that, she brought up the fact that oftentimes our elementary, even upper elementary students are interested in being teachers. But then we lose that, wanes over time, and we've got to cultivate that through grassroots and kind of building on what Penny was talking about in Fayette. Really making sure like Ed Rising chapters are in every middle and high school and Ed Prep program, and that there's some resources to give them enriching, interesting activities to do to cultivate and foster that interest in the education career, all the way through their training, and then of course this whole idea of shifting from an unpaid clinical observation and student teaching model to maybe paid internship apprenticeship model, I think would be a big win too. But just wanted to kind of mention some of those things as things that we could identify as near-term wins to put us a step forward as we continue to think about this more comprehensively in the long term.
Yeah, Amanda, I want to jump in and say that, Jim, I agree, except I would conceptualize it in my world in this way, that we put together a holistic framework. Within that framework, some things could be near term, some long term. In other words, we're going to have to change the way we do even our teacher prep program somewhat to address this. We're going to have to look for a weed-in process that we can use with a variety of things, from having our work-ready scholarship be a part of it to focusing on how we build direct pathways that are solid with apprenticeships and others from K-12 into higher ed. We have to use weed-in policies instead of weed-outs, such as praxis is maybe not the best weed-in. And so on. So I think putting together a holistic framework and look at, Representative Tipton, what we're willing to do this time and next time, I think is a good way of thinking about it. But bottom line, in the end, what the commissioner said is absolutely true. I had a superintendent call me this morning and said, Dr. Thompson, I really need your help in finding a 3rd grade teacher. We no longer can exist without one. It's to that point of conversations that we're having now, and it is a desperation conversation. So I would agree, Commissioner, in that regard. So I hope we are able to not put off doing something this term with this. I think we can't kick the can any longer. The alternative pathways can only get us so far, and I think they may have gotten us about as far as we can go without really considering a level of quality that we would want to be incorporated in the system.
I've
Thank-
got a couple of questions here. Is everybody aware of the EPSB decision yesterday regarding the praxis scores? I read a little bit about that, so I know that's been a topic. But I just want to point out another topic that I'm hearing more and more from teachers and superintendents is one of the pressures they're having is discipline in the classroom. I'm hearing that more and more, and it's not just in the urban areas. I'm hearing it in the rural areas. I know there's been some discussion about making changes to Senate Bill 200 a few years ago. So are other people hearing that same conversation? And what can we do to have a serious conversation to address that?
So,
Yeah.
let me hop in real quick on this.
Please.
First of all, I love the points that Jim made on making this an area of focus. Certainly is important. I think the piece too that we are not even really thinking about with creating, shifting student teaching from an unpaid internship to some sort of apprenticeship style earn and learn type of deal is all of the students that we are leaving out in low income families and families that can't afford for their, for their child to take an entire semester off of work in order to be able to do student teaching. So by creating a paid internship, if that's the route that we are able to go, we not only incentivize, but we broaden our base and are much more inclusive of families that probably wouldn't have had that privilege before. So I think that's really important to note too. Representative Tipton, you are exactly right. I hear a lot of issues about discipline concerns in schools. There are lots of things that you can chalk it up to. I think a lot of it is just anecdotal right now, though, because, some people will say, well, it's because students are out of a routine and they were at home during the pandemic so much and those types of things. But what we also have to think about too is this is a little bit of a drip factor because if we are short on teachers, then we are even shorter on administrators, qualified administrators. And so those are the folks that typically deal with discipline. And so if we can't find enough people who have the qualifications to teach in our classrooms, then we certainly are struggling to find the qualification, the qualified individuals to lead school districts and to quell issues like the one that you're talking about. So unfortunately, that's not a short-term solution, but I think it's a reality of kind of what this domino effect has done in our schools.
Can I almost said pounce. I don't want to make it seem like I'm pouncing on Lieutenant Governor. But I do want to speak as a parent and as an active parent in the schools and as someone who has friends who are teachers. And I must say that it's much more complicated than the kids are badder than they used to be, right? Because I hear that a lot. What's wrong with the parents and why aren't they doing what they need to do for their kids? It's so much more complicated than that. And I would venture to say that if we look at the data, we can look at data across this country that talks about who's getting punished, how they're being punished. All of that's factoring into this, right? We know where the discipline issues are concerned. And what does discipline look like and what are they quote unquote punishing? We can talk about teacher prep. Dr. Thompson talked about teacher prep and changing. We don't know what classroom management, how it's being taught in our teacher prep programs. And if we're trying to bring in SEL and trying to address all of these kids with these other concerns, is that being adjusted to account for what we now expect teachers to be able to evaluate and fix in the classroom? Right.
Well,
So when we talk
I'm
about,
sorry.
no, Aaron Thompson, now I've lost it because I have no attention span. Go ahead, say what you're going to say.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I would never interrupt you, Penny.
Anyway, go ahead.
I'm going to say, I think you're right. I used to, the part that, and I did read EPSB's decision. I think it's a good decision, but it's still just the beginning of how we should be looking at the dispositional elements of what we want in our teachers. It doesn't fully address that, nor does it fully address what we need to do in our EPP, in our teacher prep areas about how we help teachers to understand how to work with all students and how to build some of those out. So I think there are beginnings, but I would hope that our beginnings aren't our ends or our total truths, or that we think will be a panacea to the ultimate outcome of what we're dealing with. This happened over time, and it's more than just us having a shortage of teachers. It's us making sure that we have the learners that we need that's coming out of our schools. And then how do we build the teacher prep programs, the recruitment, the retention, and all those elements that we're talking about in that regard. And that's going to take a little time. So I appreciate what EPSB did yesterday. I would just let you know that even though it's not just a pure standardized score, there's still a whole lot more that we need to consider as we think about weeding people in, especially people that have historically been disenfranchised from it, like teachers of color. So there's a whole lot more I think we're going to have to be focused on in this process.
Chair Tipton, I traveled the state talking to superintendents, and that discipline issue is a big issue, and it's part of the challenge of working conditions for our teachers. And so, we know some of the salary challenges we've had. This last budget allowed our most of our districts were able to give at least a pretty nice raise, but there's still too far of a gap there. And I put a document in the chat that Bowling Green Independent Schools put together, kind of highlight the plight of their teachers, particularly beginning teachers, just to try to live on what they make currently. And but that discipline piece is a piece. Just in Kentucky at their co-op board meeting, and there was a robust discussion about Senate Bill 200 of 2014 on that juvenile justice work. I'm on the Judicial Commission on Mental Health that the State Supreme Court and AOC are working on. And so there is some work moving forward, I think, some traction on making some adjustments to the juvenile justice piece through that work. And Senator Westerfield's been open to making some adjustments too. And I think that's part of the puzzle. I think trauma-informed capacities among our school folks to understand and have the proper response there. It's gonna take a comprehensive approach on that side, but that juvenile justice reform work, I think, is going to be a key piece so that we can have the intervention pathways necessary to address some of our more situations. Right now, it seems like the kind of the rights of the offenders supersede the rights of the other students in the classrooms, and clearly runs classroom. So that's an important piece to the equation, in our opinion. So I'm glad you brought it up.
This is a huge conversation. Is there anybody else who wanted to share before we kind of wrap up this part?
Amanda, I just
Yeah.
also want to add into this conversation, when we're talking about retainment of educators in the system, workload is a big issue right now, but also making sure that we have good mentorship program for those young teachers that are coming into the field, so that they have the supports, they have someone that they can lean on and have conversations with about good professional practice. They're there with a master teacher. We lost a bit of that when K-TIP went away, but making sure that we do have something in place where we have good supports for people coming in. So we're just not throwing them into the classroom and shutting the door and not making sure that they don't have all the supports that they need.
Thank you, Eddie. Yes, noted on that for sure. It's a big job. It's a big job. Anybody else? This great conversation. Well, I'm going to wrap up what actually went a totally different direction than I expected, but that's why this group is very organic and I love it. So just as a wrap up, what we will do for this, and when we come back together, our next meeting, we're not finished with this part, but for February 1st, what we'll do is I wrote copious notes just about the points you brought up today around communication, around the dual credit conversation, and really the teacher pipeline conversation and narrowing of the topics. I've captured this and would love to tap into you guys again for this, and Representative, if that would be helpful to even narrow down. Really, I feel like I've captured what a lot of the things, and we will also have the comments in the notes you put in the comment box archived as well. And that is extremely helpful to capture that and narrow down the issues, so we can put that together and get your feedback even in the interim before we meet again, because I know Representative Tipton will encourage us to do that early and often. It is a short session and they're kicking it off early January, and I would say not going to slow down till the end of that term. So we will summarize that. What I'm going to do, because it is 2 o'clock already, which is hard to believe, we're going to transition into this year's recommendations. And so how we did this last year is the recommendations coming from the work groups. The work groups have met almost monthly for the past several months, since I think March, maybe April. I've kind of lost track of the year, to be honest, because it's gone by so fast. But we've had excellent input and work that has gone into this, good questions, and really areas, quite honestly, where we found out we don't know nearly as much as that we would need to know to even make recommendations. So you're going to see some of the actions to be is ask more questions, engage more students and families into the needs to make sure things are relevant. So Robin is going to share this. She'll share the recommendations and suggested actions. So know that these are not anything that anyone has to do, but we want to get your opinion on where you really want us to prioritize the work. Not that any of it's not important, but where you would like us to zero in on. And when we come back in February, I'll bring the summarized notes from 21 and 22 and really come together and get your all's guidance on where we go to make this as actionable and collaborative, obviously, as possible. So Robin, I'm going to hand it to you to briefly go over each one, and then we'll prioritize and keep up with our agenda today.
Okay.
Hey, Amanda, I just wanted
Yes.
you, I'm sorry, Robin, I just want you to know I put in the chat box the information from FCPS
Yes.
about Grow Your Own.
Yes, thank you, Penny. And I will capture this and send this out to the group, because there's been a lot of good resources placed in the chat today. So thank you, Penny, and others for sharing the articles and the things. We will definitely do that. So I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Amanda. Joette, if you wouldn't mind to go ahead and drop the link to these recommendations, like the whole document that's in the member folder, into the chat box, I'd appreciate that. So that if anyone on the call wants to go back to those, it would be really helpful. So I just wanted to say we're so thankful to all the work group members who have been working so hard this last year to just kind of dig through these issues, and a lot of information, a lot of stakeholder feedback, and come up with these prioritized priorities and the kind of some suggested action steps to go along with those. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to start with 9th grade on track, and we'll just quickly go through the top 3 priorities, not in any particular order, that this group has identified, and then we'll give you an opportunity to ask any questions, clarifying questions that you have, and then we'll just ask for your input about what is most actionable and what is really key for us to get started on as top priorities. So I'm going to go ahead then and share my screen. And what you see here is the first recommendation from the 9th grade on track work group, and that is to expand school and community capacity to support middle and high school students' post-secondary readiness. And there are a lot of ways that we have discussed that this might happen. One of which is to identify some evidence-based practices and then pilot those recommendations within a community of practice statewide. This might include some things like a real deep analysis of the school's data. It would involve teacher leaders stepping up to lead parts of the work. It might include mentors, like near peer mentors from the high school or from the middle school. It might include some type of transition program from 8th grade to 9th grade. It might include really focusing on instructional and grading practices that give access to all students so that they have rigorous coursework, that they have alignment to standards for the grade that they're in. So a lot of different ideas there around evidence-based practices, but the idea of for the action step would be to have a group of schools or districts who might pilot some of these ideas through a community of practice. Another possible action step would be to launch a statewide professional development and communication plan to share some of what this community of practice is learning. And then also to think about a communication plan to really help parents of middle and high school students so that they can provide more support at home. We all agree that parents send the best students they have, and they do the best that they can, but sometimes they don't have information that we're all privy to. And so to make that a little bit easier for them so that they can support post-secondary readiness in the home is the idea behind that final action step. So that's the first recommendation, to expand school and community capacity to support post-secondary readiness. Another recommendation is to catalyze bridge experiences for students who are transitioning from 8th grade to 9th grade. And we could do this in a variety of ways, but bridge experiences would include things like summer camps or summer programs, or maybe a week or two in advance of school starting, to bring students in and give them experiences there. But it also might include something like a year-long bridge experience, like a 9th grade academy, where the 8th grade incoming 9th graders are given an opportunity to really make that transition into high school. So two possible action steps would be to elevate existing programs that are having a good impact, or to even promote bridge experiences statewide for all students who are transitioning from 8th grade to 9th grade. All right, so the second one, they're putting forth catalyzing these bridge experiences. And then the third recommendation that came from our 9th grade on track group is to increase understanding of the needs and perspectives of middle school students. And this actually came from our last meeting in September. Our own Charlie Browning was sitting at my table, and she just elevated this idea that maybe we don't understand as much about middle school perspectives as we think we do. And so it would be worth our while to invest time and effort into hearing their voices, and not just related to their readiness, but also to the relevance of the work that we're doing to their lives and what they see their futures being. So the first action step that was elevated was to have some focus groups with middle school students so that we can better understand their awareness and the relevance of what we're talking about, and how we can maybe bridge those gaps so that we're working as a team a little bit more. And then the second one was just to really elevate communication, key data points, student perspectives, any kind of information that we can elevate so that local schools and districts can address these issues at the school and district level, because they might not know what we've unearthed through a lot of focus group conversations and interviews, with students and families and just all the stakeholders. All right, so those are the three recommendations from the 9th grade on track group. So I'll just pause here and see if there are any questions, or if you need any clarification about anything. And Lou, I know that you've been an important member of that group. If you want to add anything, feel free to do that.
No, I think you really got it. And I was glad to see them all coming together this way, really succinctly, Robin. I would just add to the narrative that we talked a lot about the voice of students, but we also talked about the importance of tapping into a diverse set of students in the conversation, thinking that we will learn from them, that the experience in rural Kentucky might be very different from suburban or urban Kentucky, and to really think about what that means in terms of college going and support from them at that critical transition point. I think we talked about a research agenda around successful transition from middle to high and secondary to post-secondary. And I also wanted to add how much I appreciated the 9th grade on track group, the intentionality we brought to the conversation around not making this a deficit model. In other states, they often call these early warning systems, or there's some red flag, or there are buzzers, or, I feel like the troops begin marching in. And so we approach it as a deficit model instead of thinking about how we meet students where they are at these transition points, wrap services around them, and then move them forward on their own personalized path to successful transition. So that nuanced spirit of the conversation, I think, comes out in the optimism in these recommendations.
I want to jump in and say, oh, I'm sorry, Lou, I thought you were done.
No, it's okay. I just said I got an amen in the chat from Penny. So.
Oh, well, yeah, Penny, I need amens, girl. I think Lou's point is an excellent point. I want to just say, though, that number 2, bridge experiences, if we formalize this is what we know. 1 and 3 is incorporated into that. I mean, that's a part of the bridge experience, right? So I'm going to obviously vote for number 2. The other thing, too, is we also know we have evidence now, and I tell people who don't believe me, buy one of my books, whereas these experiences are the best items that we've seen to prepare students socially, emotionally, academically, and culturally to the next level, wherever it may be. So it's one of our best mechanisms for closing gaps. And I would love to see us have bridge experiences in all of these big transition years for that reason alone. It's with tons of evidence and research on this. So, Lou said that just threw in voting. Yeah. But the idea that it is about us looking at those bridge experiences, in my mind, as incorporating both 1 and 3.
Okay, well, we're actually going to vote now, and I'm going to pull this up. And do you guys see that on your screen?
Not yet.
You do not. Okay.
Oh, wait, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to relaunch. Here we go. Okay. Everyone see 9th grade on track? And if you will, I believe you can click on it to vote. Okay. Are you able to see the results in live, or are you not? You cannot.
Not yet.
Okay. I just want to make sure everyone's had a chance. Okay. I think it just got shared with you on the screen or not. Can you see it? Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sure what I see something different than what you do. So you can see that the second one, catalyzed bridge experiences for students transitioning. But I think to Dr. Thompson's point is that they really all fold in well together. And I think they kind of complement. The second one it was increase understanding and needs and perspective, and then expand the community capacity and support. And so this really helps give us some direction on where to go with this. And I think it aligns beautifully with some of our other work as well. So this is super helpful. Any other comments on this piece? You'll see this come back in February. We just had to get some direction to start narrowing down where you would like to see this go. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing this. Okay, great. I think it's stop share. And Robin, do you want to go to the next one?
Okay, absolutely. So our second work group was the Early Post-Secondary Opportunity Work Group. We call it the EPSO work group. And Harmony Little from KCTCS and I co-lead this group, and we've been really excited about the work that they've done this year. So the first draft recommendation we want to share with you is to create a culture of access and high expectations by improving communication related to early post-secondary opportunities. And as Amanda said earlier, you're going to see communication as a theme through a lot of these recommendations. But one of their action steps was this idea of a comprehensive statewide communication system to make sure that students and families receive the key information that they need for post-secondary opportunities. And this might include elevating the dual credit system or the early post-secondary system that we have, and success stories, along with data points, key data points related to these systems in Kentucky, to engage community partners. And I'll just give an example of one of the conversations that we had. It was about how in our adult education efforts, that a lot of the people who are in adult education courses are the parents of students that we're trying to communicate with. And so that if we could integrate this content, if we could be better about just sharing information across agencies that way, that we might actually get to the people who sometimes we don't get to. And then the third idea here was to increase the prominence of this early post-secondary data that we have on KY Stats report card. That was an example, but any way that we share data about early post-secondary opportunities or dual credit, that we would want to increase the prominence of that so that more people have this information. So the first one's related to communication. The second one is about increasing access to dual credit by incentivizing teachers. And we would incentivize this in two ways. One would be to incentivize teachers who are currently teaching dual credit courses. And this might be through stipends or even by helping them to maintain credentials. Like if they're a CTE teacher and they have to maintain a professional certificate, that we might support the maintenance of that certificate in some way. But we also talked a lot about incentivizing teachers to acquire the credentialing that they would need to teach an early post-secondary course, especially dual credit. And this might be providing financial assistance to them to get the 18 hours, which is typically what's required to teach a dual credit course. And this could be for in-service or for pre-service teachers. A third idea was to investigate some type of endorsement through certification for teachers of dual credit courses, and even to promote expansions of master's degree options for teachers in the disciplines where we need them most. And so I think one of the conversations we had even involved the lieutenant governor about how having 18 hours in a certain discipline, people in the past have not known that would qualify them to actually teach a dual credit course. So to be even a little more intentional as teachers are going through their advanced coursework about the opportunity that might be out there for them to teach dual credit. All right, so that one's related to increasing access through incentives. And then the last recommendation is to define and promote dual credit program quality and alignment. And this really involves a lot of coordination between secondary and post-secondary partners. We've had a lot of conversations about how if everybody owns it, nobody owns it, or if two people own it, it's not really clear who takes the lead in providing like supports that students might need in order to be successful. We also talked about this alignment of dual credit courses with the competencies and the core components that are outlined in the statewide general education core. We've talked about looking at students who take dual credit courses and then following their pathway, especially in STEM areas, to see how successful they are, if they stick with that pathway and so forth. And then finally, to increase funding for post-secondary institutions specifically to provide student supports. And so we're talking about things like advising and tutoring, access to libraries, all kinds of things that would help students be more successful or have a higher success rate in dual credit coursework. All right, so defining and promoting the quality and alignment of the coursework. So those are the three. Now I'll pause again and see if there's any conversation. Amanda, hand it to you to facilitate the polling.
So any additional thoughts? You can hear some of the same themes resonate from what we had talked about earlier, which I think is honestly a good thing. When we see the stars align on a lot of this. Any other additional thoughts you had seeing this, or that would connect to our previous conversation that you want to make note of before we prioritize this? Okay, well, let's share our poll.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is a question out of ignorance. When a K-12 teacher designs a course, typically it's in alignment to a set of standards and a scope and sequence that the standards that the state has established, the scope and sequence that the district has established, and any curricular supports that are available. So they build all that out. It's been a lot of years since I taught a college class, but when I taught a college class, none of that was present. It was go and explore the space that is American government. And you could pull other people's syllabi and information like that, but there wasn't really a lot of standardization to that to align to. So I'm wondering, but that, that was 25 years ago. So what exists now, if we think, I think built into this question or this discussion is that there's an assumed problem of alignment to dual credit classes offered in high school with what dual credit classes are offered at the content that is offered or required at the college level. So there's a disconnect between that. But I'm asking what mechanisms are in place to ensure that there is alignment of course content at the higher education level. And I ask that out of ignorance because I don't know.
Well, just so happens I have an answer. There is alignment, it has to be by accreditation standard and CPE standards. You have learning outcomes. As a matter of fact, if it's general education, CPE controls the policy of those learning outcomes. If it's a major course or anything else that has multiple sections, they have to actually have certain learning outcomes that are standard. The way you teach it to get there is where the non-standard behavior comes with academic freedom. So they're very much aligned with a set of competencies and have been really in that regard. And it's a college, of course, dual credit is a college course that then K-12 must actually basically teach that course. And then K-12 decides whether or not they want to, if they are wanting to give if they're wanting to give high school credit for that course, in other words, right? Because it is a college course. But any of the courses that are taught right now as dual credit, they do have a set of learning outcomes they must adhere to, and it must be the same across all sections, even with different faculty. Now they get there in a different way, but you must show assessment to that for accreditation standards that in fact those competencies have been reached when that course is taught, whether it's a history course or an English or anything else. So Commissioner, I'm not sure if I'm answering correctly. If I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's really helpful.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering then, and thank you for helping me with that. I'm wondering then how, if that model works in higher education, how can you extend some version of that into your dual credit courses? And what would that look like?
So
well, it's the same course, whether we teach it as dual credit or we teach it inside of higher ed, it has to be the same course. The same accreditation standard holds. So for us, it doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, we look at that It doesn't matter if a high school teacher teaches that course, they must follow those standards of learning outcomes, and you have to have a college professor in that area oversee to make sure that that holds true, if you will. Now, I'm not saying it always holds true to that facet or that cleanliness of that, but that's what it is. So it doesn't matter. If we teach a course, whether it's to high school students or if we verify a course, whether it's to high school students, has to be the same course that's taught, whether it's all college students, because it's a college course. If we don't, we lose accreditation of that area, and we come down hard on you from CPE.
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering then, I mean, I appreciate and understand that it's required to be aligned and be the same course, but it seems to me in reality, there is a disconnect, or there's at least a perceived disconnect between the rigor of what's offered at the dual credit course that's offered at the high school level versus that which is offered at the secondary level. So I guess I'm wondering what are the mechanisms by which higher education ensures that the individual instructor is adhering to program standards, and how are those, or are they not, extended to those delivering that same course in a high school setting? And so if there is no problem, there's no problem. But what I keep hearing, because this keeps coming up, is that there's a problem. And so what are those mechanisms? I guess I'm wondering. I'm sorry if I'm not being very.
It varies by institution, Jason. I will tell you at UK, the instructor of the course at UK is the instructor for high school. And the cooperating teacher at the high school then does the opposite side of the alignment. So if they're doing a history 110, then the high school history teacher is ensuring that whatever Kentucky academic standards will be aligned with that course for assessment purposes, that's happening on the P12 side, for instance. But there's also an expectation that they're common final exams. So that's part of the alignment process there as well.
And what you're asking, Jason, is another question, actually, at least the way I'm interpreting it. There is three things, maybe, and Amanda, you'll correct me. One thing, there is a perception that that's the case. And in some cases, it is the case because the K-12 teachers haven't been, quote unquote, in which you're supposed to be, which is a policy. Professional development needs to take place to make sure that they are adhering to the same standards. That's one issue. That's more than a perception, that's true, right? So how do we fix that, right? The second one is there is still some bias. I'm trying to think of a better word, Lou, and I can't. Some bias from many higher ed faculty saying, well, the K-12 teachers are not, they're not as qualified, quote unquote. Even if they have the SAC standards of qualifications. So that's that we have to fix. A third thing, which I think is a more credible way for us to consider what to do, and it may not address this year, Amanda, and I apologize, is that we need to really build more of our content area master's degrees. They're 18 hours beyond, to really skill up many of the teachers in high schools who want to do this, to where then we have a mechanism to ensure quantity and quality, if you want to call it that, in that regard. The other thing that we haven't done very well in all of our institutions really is to do what Lou just said, and that is to make sure there's an alignment and that the people on the post-secondary side are doing the work with the P12 folks on that side to ensure that's the alignment. That's the way it's supposed to be done. That's the way the policy says it should be done. So those are all the areas that we do know. I don't know if we have clear or clean enough data to say that if it's taught on the K-12 end, that it's not as much of a quality if it's taught on a higher ed end. I haven't seen that data fully yet anyhow. So yeah, I will tell you, so that's why I'm saying maybe there's some bias there. Amanda, if I said anything that's wrong in what y'all are doing, you'll correct me.
No, I think you're right on. I think it's the rigor of the course is varied. And that's why there was a lot of conversation in the EBSO work group around roles and responsibilities of the institution and the high school, because it started out strong and then it's gotten, and not in all programs, this is not the all. In some programs it is, here's your syllabus, teach it. And there's not a lot of intentional communication and coordination of expectation and preparedness, and even what resources are available. That's not true for all. But that is where there were some weak links around rigor of coursework. And then it even also went into that same thing that we had talked about earlier, that Representative Tipton brought up, with even alignment to the core components that's outlined in the general education core, that there were courses that weren't really aligned to any of that. And so when it transferred, the student was told this is going to transfer, but when it transferred, it didn't even meet any of those core components of the general education piece of their pathway, their curricular pathway. And so there was just a lot of conversation around, we really need to clarify roles, responsibilities on both ends, because it's two worlds colliding that are very, very different. But when we bring those together, what is the expectation and the role of each to do the best we can to ensure a successful experience for the students? And then this is the beginning of their transcript. And so really that coordination and communication and rigor of the course is absolutely essential to give them exposure to post-secondary coursework and expectation. And so that's a lot of the conversations around exactly what you all talked about.
This last define and promote dual credit program quality and alignment, it starts from a presumption that it's not aligned. And therefore steps need to be taken. So I'm not don't know this, but I wonder, just in folks that research and work in higher education institutional problems, what does the research around what creates that misalignment, and what actions can be taken in an institution to ensure that alignment? If that research exists, which I think it probably would, I don't know what it is, it's not my area. But if that exists, that would be a good place to start, to say, what are the principles that you want to have in place? And if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? So if they work in higher ed, then that's the same principles you would want to apply in the K-12 space.
It's interesting that you say that, and I agree. Just so happens Kentucky is one of the leading states in doing that research. So there is. We've done some direct dual credit, and a lot of this hadn't had enough of an in, quote unquote, to really figure out the problems until now. And Kentucky has done like 2 or 3 years of research on this and looking at return on investment, if you will, for those taking dual credits, and the success of learning outputs, like what happens in colleges from that. So we do, Jason, have a best practice. We have a national organization that we are a part of, Amanda, you'll throw in the name here, that aligns with that. So there's another level of accreditation that sometimes our universities and colleges didn't want to do that ensures that also. So I think you're absolutely right. If we align the idea of what is good practice, good outcomes, good quality, all of those things that we're really saying here, that may ultimately be the solution. To do that, I think we have to, though, build the quantity of high school teachers that are SACS accredited to do this. Because, I mean, that's one of the areas I promise you we have an issue with. I've talked to Representative Tipton and others. And really, I'd like to talk to EPSB about how we develop more of these content masters that would allow that to happen, be really focused on that. So I'm agreeing with your ultimate conclusion here, I guess.
So we can certainly expand, I think, even on Commissioner Glass and President Thompson, your all's conversation around the third recommendation, to really dig deeper and to share those studies and evidence-based practices, and really take a hard look at ours, and using our state level data. As Dr. Thompson said, we do have a research around that. And so we can definitely expand that. And I appreciate that conversation and challenge. I don't disagree in clarifying language. I think it's super important. What Dr. Thompson was talking about was NASEP, which is the National Alliance of Concurrent Enrollment Partnerships. It is type of an accreditation for dual enrollment. We have a couple of our campuses that have chosen to be a part of that, that run their courses through that process and their system, their program. They run their system through like an accreditation to ensure that their processes and coursework and practices are reflecting best practice. And so Kentucky is a partner just to always learn and really network with other states. But that is what he's talking about. And I'll put that in the chat if you want to look at their resources. Pretty good. If you have not done so already, go on and prioritize, but we will expand the third recommendation on that piece and clarify some of that language. I really appreciate it. Great question, Lou. If you can see, it says alignment questions moving forward. How does higher ed respond to the P12 move towards deeper, more personalized learning? How will instructional pedagogical alignment happen in an organic way to ensure seamlessness around vibrant learning experiences for every learner? I think that's a great question. Lou, can I ask you, have you guys at UK started to think through that, since your process around dual credit is quite different than most partnerships? Have you guys started?
Yeah, we really have, because it's been on our hearts, again, to avoid any of the biased thinking that Aaron alluded to earlier. We think about the fact that there is a lot of project-based learning happening in higher ed. And so we know we're pivoting in P12 to deep thinking, Socratic seminars, apprenticeships, work-based learning, all the authenticity questions that come into play. But there's still, our high school students in dual credit tell us all the time that it feels different to be in that higher ed class. And so I think a lot of that has to do with what we're thinking about related to vibrant learning experiences. So we're not going to, I can't imagine a place where we in any way try to wrestle with academic freedom around pedagogical choices, but I think that the demand from the learners will begin to change that over time. So this really is a long game question for us, not a short-term continuum question, but one of those that I think that if we truly want seamlessness, then our students are going to have to roll from the end of secondary into post-secondary in such a way that they don't have these significant stops and starts in the way they learn over time. So high levels of agency and voice, which higher ed generally does really, really well. So just marrying the two world experiences on behalf of the individual learner, I think is what I'm after here in the conversation.
Lou, I'm with you. You may remember in 2009 and 10, and as soon as you all have those standards in P12,
I was so young back then.
I know we're ready to do that alignment again. And as you all know, we have our graduate profile doing the same thing. So, and we're done with, we're now incorporating those into our majors and pre-majors and our gen ed. So that's exactly right. When there's to a point of where those standards are there, our hope is to do this like we did with the Commonwealth commitment in 210, is to do exactly that, because that's what we want, because we know that at least the conversation that we're having in P12 is a way that we can do that alignment really clearly. So yeah, we're all about that.
Great. So we're just sharing what you all have shared. You can see the middle or the second recommendation around the incentivizing teacher credentialing is a priority. It really rolls in beautifully with our conversation around the teacher workforce and really coming to terms with what's our narrowed focus of ask around recruitment and retention and growth. And so that's encouraging. We will definitely tease out the feedback from the third to really make that more robust. And of course, the access and of high expectations, and that communication is always there as that theme. I think we're going to have some new ideas to come around just how we handle communication moving forward with those recommendations. I'm going to keep us moving to the next one just because we're getting a little close on time. And I love the conversation and so appreciate it. So if we can take that one off. And Robin, let's get to first year success.
Okay.
Post-secondary success, first year post-secondary success.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So I'm grateful again to the work group members who have put forth these recommendations. Our very own Robert Hayes, who's on with us today, is one of the co-leads of this group, along with Lily Massa McKinley from here at CPE. And so their first recommendation we want to talk about is related really to increasing success in college level courses related to the needs of post-pandemic first-year college students. We know that things have changed a lot over the last few years. So the idea here is to evaluate and adapt academic placement, pedagogy, and support practices. So 3 pieces there to this recommendation to really increase student success in college level courses. And this might include things like providing professional development about effective instructional practices and embedded academic supports in response to the needs of the pandemic, to research and promote best practices and academic placement of first-year students. And the group really had a lot of conversations about helping students understand the benefits, the financial benefits of college placement in the first year. And then finally, we're going back to communications, developing a strategic communications campaign that really helps high school students and parents build this culture of high expectations and then give them tools to be successful across the P20 continuum. All right, so there's the first one, which is about increasing success through academic placement, pedagogy, and support practices. The second one is more related to relationships. So we've got strengthened relationships among students, staff, and family, and faculty to foster a sense of belonging. And so the sense of belonging has been a topic of conversation for this group the entire year. And this really doesn't just apply to the first year, but this group was adamant about the pre-matriculation all the way through degree completion, that it's important for these students to be connected to other students and to their community throughout their entire college experience. And so there are several potential action steps here to continue and expand students' exposure to colleges and to involve them in summer bridge programs as they're transitioning to college, to really be focused. I know this is a pet project for Dr. Thompson, this idea of colleges being student ready rather than the other way around. So helping with a community of practice to help faculty be student ready, to coordinate partnerships and streamline communications again among middle and high schools and the post-secondary institutions, so that these experiences that students have are even better, that they just keep getting better and have the maximum benefit. And then finally, to integrate more career exploration and decision-making into a student's first year experience. To help them. And, we've talked so much about just making the most of the courses that they take, helping them understand what pathway they're on and what's required for the pathway. So the second recommendation is really about relationships that lead to success. And then finally, to increase awareness and support for students and families around post-secondary financial issues. And they've really wordsmithed around understanding the financial aspects of financing college, financial stability, because we know that a lot of students start strong and then they bump up against financial barriers. This can be a reason why they don't continue. And just general financial wellness. We want them to graduate in a good place financially so that they get off to a good start with their career and their life. So some of the action steps are potentially to leverage the partnership with Kia to continue to provide resources, and especially focused on current college students. Because sometimes, they'll complete the FAFSA to get in, then they don't continue to complete the FAFSA to stay in. And so they run into financial obstacles once they're in college. To promote the administration of the Trellis Student Financial Wellness Survey, which would just let us know more than we know now about the current situation. To develop elements of the Strategic Higher Ed Matters campaign related to the financial aspects of attending college. And some of those things would include, return on investment, the cost, the timeline, the process, the procedures, like who's responsible for what, and promoting the work ready or other scholarships for college. So this third recommendation is really related to financial literacy, financial wellness. So Robert, feel free to chime in if I missed anything, or if you want to add any context to any of those recommendations. And Amanda, I'll turn it back to you.
I would say very briefly, nothing to add to those recommendations, but the makeup of the group. And this is echoing what Lou had said earlier. I really think that we implicitly rejected any of the deficit-based perspectives, and we really embraced a holistic and an assets-based perspective. And some of these recommendations, I think, abide by the rising tide analogy, because behaviors and practices that benefit historically marginalized students benefit all students. The inverse is not the case. But I just wanted to share that because I do think that that's the sentiment and the mindset of this group each time we came together and produced some of these recommendations.
Thank you, Robert. Any other comments about this? This was a really interesting group because we talked so much last year about successful transition, but the question you all really challenged us with was, so what happens when they get there and how were they successful? And even though we looked at some quantitative data just to start with successful completion of gateway courses, so much more than that. As Robert was saying, it's not about passing or failing, but it's how do you survive? How do you transition? And how do you maintain really a balance, your financial wellness, your own personal wellness, and academic success. And so it was a really interesting group to be a part of. And I think some real great conversations that are really a different conversation than we had a few years ago about as students transition as new students and new residents, even on campuses, and how that's embraced. And so I'll stop there. And any other comments before we put the poll up? All right, Robin or Joette, if you all will share. You'll go on and vote just on where you would like to see us weigh in on more. This group is really anxious actually to get back together to figure out where you wanted to prioritize and dig deeper. Okay, you should be able to see. So pretty heavy emphasis on strengthening relationships among students, staff, and faculty. That whole piece around belonging and really finding your way where you are. And then it has a second with increased awareness and support, and then evaluate and adapt academic placement pedagogy. So it's really about the individual student experience. And I think that's what we've talked about in other transition points today too. So that's really interesting to me. So we will definitely lean in on that and definitely prioritize that work, and we will get back with you on that piece. Lou, I know you had another thought before we wrap up today about the early post-secondary opportunities. So
yeah, I don't want to prolong it, but it just has been rattling around since Representative Tipton's first comments. And then when I heard Jason wrestling with a lot of things that my team and I talk about a lot. And I just wonder if the task force grappled with this notion of, do we have clarity around our vision for the future of early post-secondary opportunities? What do we really want? I know we have a grand vision for the continuum in terms of equitable access and successful transition to and completion of post-secondary for all learners. But do we perhaps lack some clarity around what we as a Commonwealth want for early post-secondary opportunities. For example, we didn't talk a lot about ubiquitous access to today anyway, like removing gatekeeping from post-secondary, early post-secondary learning for kids who have traditionally not been accepted into those kinds of programs, really kind of pushing hard against the notion of weeding kids out instead of weeding kids in some of those questions. So not a conversation for today either, but I wonder if before we leave with, you know, kind of a bow tied around our final recommendations, if we could have some cross-agency clarity about what our vision is for dual credit in particular, but early post-secondary in general, I think might help Representative Tipton, frankly, moving forward, and others as they grapple with that.
And Lou, I want to jump in and say I appreciate that. I think you're right. If we have data, we have data and knowledge about what's successful. We know that not enough low income and students of color are getting into any of these early post-secondary. So when we talk about equity, we need to start putting metrics around that and really working with our institutions to reach those metrics. So fully agree. And for any of this to fully be successful, if we talk about equity, then we're going to have to really think about it. And I know we don't have time for me to go into a diatribe, but if we're really connecting, you know, what we already know is connected, and that is that we're going to have an educated population to keep our economy up, we're going to have to think about what does that look like and make sure everybody has the opportunity to participate. And that's clearly one of the questions you're posing, Lou, as one of the items that we have to consider. So, and by the way, on the back end, the research shows that when these kids have participated in a post-secondary, they've actually excelled beyond those standards that we have looked at in the past as being excellent. So that point is even more well taken when we look at the research on the back end.
Yeah, and Lou, I so appreciate it. And Robin can definitely add detail, but to your point, when we started digging into the policy, and we have a grant with the College and High School Alliance, it's really helped us team up with other states and national groups around really dual enrollment, right? Whatever all the states are calling it. And we are hoping to propose, and I know Dr. Thompson's in support of an attainment goal, of being really intentional, like what is it we want to achieve here? Because just an increase in number is one thing, but is it serving the same? Or are we really increasing student engagement? Because we have the financial support around it, but what are we doing to make sure that it's meaningful and that there is support, and that we're not just signing kids up for the sake of signing kids up, but we're really engaging them in future opportunities. And so I really appreciate that question, because that's what we're hitting on in the policy, and even talking through the attainment goal of what we already know. And as you all know, Kentucky is incredibly blessed with a ridiculous amount of data that tells the story, whether we want to tell the story or not, of who's engaging in those courses and who's not, and what's offered and what is not. And that's what we're pushing in on. And that's where it's been a really heavy emphasis on even having more teachers credentialed and having more access. And the advising piece, because one of the things that Robin and her and Trinity, her colleague, did was really ask, who are you serving? Because a lot of our students who shared with us when we did our focus group said, I didn't even know I was in a dual credit class, or I didn't know it was an AP. They just signed me up. And when we asked the parents said, until they knew my title, they did not share with me what my child was signed up to do. That's not okay. You know, that everybody deserves a plan and engagement and intentionality. And so really taking those voices really from students and parents heavily of what we've got to do something different. And when we started to dive in, we, you know, even male to female, we have a very high population of female taking dual credit and a low population of males taking dual credit. That's a problem, right? And so we have to get real. And so when we push in on the districts, we are asking, well, who's taking your dual credit classes and your AP classes? And then what's your policies? Because to your point, gatekeeping, there are a lot of local policies for a multitude of reasons that we get blamed for, we as the state, right? But or the law, but that is simply not true. Some are handpicked, some are told they have to be a senior with a 3.75. Some say we only have 25 spots and we're going to pick who these are. And so there's a lot of the gatekeeping that's the perceived state policy, when in fact it's the local policy for multitude of reasons, and appropriate or inappropriate, period. So I appreciate your question, and that's what we're pushing in on. One of the things around the policy development is really putting teeth to it and professional learning. So it's not just a policy and it's not just a toolkit, but it's like, this is what the expectation is, and this is how you would do that. And let's help you get there. And so Robin, I don't know if you want to add any more to that, but I really appreciate the question and the challenge.
I would just add that Amy mentioned goals across the continuum too, but even in this last area, Amanda, if we centered the margins more in our goals, to ensure that we are proof pointing the notion that kids in the past who might have not gotten the top 25 slots can be extremely successful, perhaps, and likely need the opportunity even more.
Absolutely. And we have that, as Dr. Thompson said, we have proof of there's not only that they succeed, but they sustain and complete. And so there is no reason not to execute such a plan for more students than just those who take it. So I so appreciate that. And Amy, to your point about the goals as well. Jason, I think you attached something. I just haven't read it quick enough.
Yeah, it was just an article from Education Next, which is kind of a right-leaning Harvard publication on the question of dual credit and rigor.
Great. Thank you for attaching.
I've read that, by the way, and I will say that Kentucky has substantially increased, partially because of the scholarship, dual credit offering. So it is time to ask these questions, in other words, right? It is time for us, as someone who's now created a critical mass in this area, that we are focusing on this exactly as we were talking about.
Yes. So I will commit before I turn it over for us to close out, because we have 3 minutes, and I will honor your time and so appreciate your feedback and conversation today. Has been pivotal for us. Is that we will follow up with an email with a lot of the resources and comments shared today in the chat box as well. If you have been able to open those links, there's a lot of great resources around that. Also, if you have any other afterthoughts and you're pondering stuff, do not hesitate to reach out. Robin and I will be responsive. We welcome the feedback and the challenge, and we will look for time on your calendar for further conversation, because we want to capture your thoughts and your experiences and expertise. And then we will be back February 1st. And when we come back February 1st, what we're going to do is really take what you said today and really try to narrow down into what actions do we want to do. And I love the goal setting piece and the real attainment piece. I think that is pivotal, but that is going to have to be, we could put something on as a proposal, but definitely want you to weigh in on what is reasonable, challenging, but something that we need to go after. Yes. Oh, okay. And so anyway, so I don't have anything else. Aaron, I'm going to let you or any of our colleagues that want to close us out today. And really, again, thank you so much. And you will be hearing from us shortly.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Thank you, team. I appreciate you all, and I appreciate the folk I'm working with. I'm thankful for that. You know, a lot of good discussion today, and a lot of good, direction. We need to hone in on some things. Doesn't mean that we're going to stop with those. As we talked about what we did, and Commissioner, I appreciate that last statement you put up there, because it's absolutely correct. What we're talking about here is something even bigger than just those items that we mentioned. So I would ask many of our elected officials on the line to really, work with us, because these folks have worked hard to really come up with stuff that we move something forward in this session that really helps move us forward in the state. We will come back over and over again, hopefully, to build on all the work that we've done. So I want to thank you all for this. I do know this. I know that what we're doing matters more than almost anything else that we do in any given day. So I appreciate the time you're putting in. Once again, happy holidays from us, at least in higher ed and K-12 and from the Continuum. Lieutenant Governor, Commissioner, I will leave the last words to you.
None for me. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks, everybody.
Me neither. I'll just tell you Merry Christmas. I'm very grateful for you all and your commitment to education in Kentucky. There are days where I feel like we're swimming upstream, and there are days where I feel like we're making progress. And anytime I get to see your all's faces, we're making progress. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a great holiday.
Thank you, guys.